What if the epicness that we sometimes spend our entire lifetime searching for exists not in spite of the boulders, but thanks to the boulder version of you, that these boulders inspire you to become? Often, when we least expect it, life thrusts us into the role of the reluctant hero or hero in our own story. How we respond in those moments can be the difference between thriving or just surviving. We believe that our story will be determined by how we dare to answer one burning question: how to choose to live. Join us as we explore the mindset shifts, innovative strategies, and captivating stories from my own life experience and those of my truly epic guests. So let's get this started. Welcome to today's episode of the How to Choose to Live podcast. And I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today. Jeffrey is someone who has been an integral part of my own expansion. And ironically enough, I did not meet this amazing man until I was in my late 50s. And I will share with you that as far as the Boulder story goes, Jeffrey came into my life a couple of years after the boulder had fallen on my daughter, and I had abruptly been launched into the world of having a previous business almost destroyed, suddenly becoming the caregiver of a child who had had so much promise, so many dreams ahead of her. And now she could definitely not walk. She could not stand. She was learning how to swallow again, learning how to sit up. And the message from this boulder was pointing me in a direction that, I'll be honest with you, the majority of people who were near and dear to me couldn't see. They did not support this. I was being asked to speak, and I was being asked to teach some of the inner game principles that had really allowed me to make it through this experience the way that I had. And so this is kind of a long introduction to this man, but I wanted you to appreciate what we have said in this podcast so far. When you are figuring out how to choose to live, it is a team sport. And Jeffrey literally came in as the coach of that team. So Jeffrey Edwards is my guest today, and he specializes, you will see, in this level of emotional intelligence, I should say, in this level of emotional intelligence, coupled with this wisdom about growing your business, whether you're a start off, whether you're a mid-tier, even teaching in universities such as Vanderbilt. He comes in with so much depth to him, and yet you'll see his demeanor is one that is so calm and so enriching that it allowed me to really let all the dust settle, or the boulders settle, and the avalanche kind of soothe itself, so that I could finally begin to see how in this next chapter of my life I would choose to live. And the beauty of this man, Jeffrey, as well as when you have your coaches, when you have your mentors, they can help you see with what I call your real eyes. They can help you realize what your blind spots have been, what this potential is, what this epicness of yourself truly is, this empowered, purpose driven, innovative, collaborative soul that you have the potential of being. So, Jeffrey, I gave you this tremendously long intro, but welcome so much to the How to Choose to Live podcast. You have been just such an inspiration to me and to what I'm doing today.
Wow, Meredith, thank you so much. I'm not even sure I should say anything more because I feel like I'm going to shatter anything you've said. I don't want I'm choking up just hearing you speak about me. I like, who is this person? I want to meet him sometime.
Uh-huh.
Truly, it's wonderful to be a part of this project and this initiative. It's really speaks to the person you are and the message that you have for so many people. It inspires me and then continues to inspire me. And so it's a real privilege and honor to be here today.
Well, one of the things that I love that I really wanted to share with this global family that is developing here in my world, and I call it a tramily, a tribe family, I really wanted to share this because our relationship evolved from one where it was you were coaching me and helping me get a level of confidence to really understand. I know that I had lost sight of who I even was. And I think a lot of people start to feel that we get, and the word that comes to me is kind of contaminated with what we think we should do, who we should be, what our lives should look like. It's that symptom of shoulding all over ourselves, right? And so you came to me helping me just ask new questions or take questions, a lot of questions that are swirling around in my mind, and start organizing them and prioritizing them. And correct me if you have a different experience, but I have found that that is one of the things that we just simply cannot do on our own, and that friends and family who have a skin in the game cannot do that for us as well. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think it's becoming increasingly more difficult. And I think one of the elements that is different than when we grew up, Meredith, is it's really social media. And when you have this worldwide platform where you're constantly feeling that you need to compare or match up with people that many of you don't even know, it's really, I can just imagine the pressure that is also felt when you don't feel like you measure up compared to
Yes.
the other people that you may be following or reading about. And it does. It can really, you can lose it, that you can lose perspective, and also that's when typically you can lose yourself, because now you're starting to question who you are, but it's always in relation to what everyone else is doing versus the person you are.
Yes. And what I hear in what you're saying is an unspoken assumption that has been ingrained into us generationally. And that assumption is this: it was originally that the things that you saw on the a screen, whether it was dating back to, I don't remember whether it was World War I, World War II, because believe it or not, I was not alive at that point. But it used to be that, I would hear from my parents, they would be sitting in the movie theaters, and if they wanted to see the world news, it would get projected sometimes weeks after the actual event onto the big screen. And then, of course, there's radio. You hear about families gathering around the radio to hear the news, which, of course, was considered fact, truth, unquestioned. And then it progressed to television. And so now the news was considered fact. Again, you didn't question it, it was truth. And then our screen started expanding even beyond that, and I think that's where the lines started to blur. And just generationally, it was kind of ingrained in us to just accept without questioning the source that, to a certain extent, anything that showed up on a screen that looked like it was portraying itself as fact must be fact. So, therefore, when we see these things on the screen, people showing themselves with rented private planes saying, "Hey, look, I've got a private plane. Look how successful I am. And my life is perfect. And I'm this and I'm that. And look at all I have achieved." we just imagine that this must be fact and this must be the one sole human being who never has had and never will have a boulder in their life. And the flip side of that is looking in the mirror going, what's wrong with me? Why do I seem to be attracting all these boulders, rocks, and pebbles in my life, not realizing that sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised looking like that biggest boulder.
Yeah, and it's I can appreciate how just how daunting it can feel, and how the experience it was for you to go through
Yes.
literally a life-changing moment, unexpected moment in your life, and to have to you still have to respond to that moment. And I think we're going back to the point of choice that you've made at the start, where there's it's I think the what happens when we have information constantly available to us and pushed out to us, it's almost it's the proverbial drinking through a fire hose, but you're not really discriminating what you're taking in. You're just taking it all in. and and when you're not really prepared, or you're not really able to take it all in, then it becomes too overwhelming and become really hard to really discern, what's truth and what's not truth, what's my truth in comparison to what others' truth may be. And it's just, you just literally just find yourself literally drowning in
Yes.
all of this information, without really having a clear identity or a clear vision for what it is what your vision, what your identity is among all of this.
And I feel like the unspoken part of what you're saying, what you're definitely implying here, is that at some point, we have to choose autonomy and ownership and say, at this point, I give myself permission to choose what am I going to focus on and what am I going to make it mean, and what sort of research am I going to challenge myself to do? What kind of questions am I going to ask? But at some point, I think that we all have to either choose to be the sovereign of our own mind, or choose to allow our environment to become that sovereign for us. And that is when we let the environment become the sovereign of our own life experience. That's, to your point, when it gets very risky, that we're going to experience the chaos, the overwhelm, the lack of direction, and sometimes that sense of I have lost who I am, much less the meaning of who I am.
Absolutely. And your example brings to light a conversation I had with me, our adopted son. He was an international student who living with us, and son of a longtime friend of mine. And I remember sitting down with him as he was going to school here in Canada, and in life for him here versus where he was from in South America was just a different cultural environment, where a lot of the social anxiety came because it was how you went out, when you were judged by how you looked, how you dressed, and within the cliques that he ran. It's nothing outrageous, but it's just really, it's kind of like you're just very conscious of it every day. And I just remember sitting down with him and saying, you have two choices in life. As simplistic as this may sound, you can decide that you can let the world define who you are, or you can take the time to define how you want the world to see you.
Ooh, ooh, I love that. Mm-hmm.
And for him, it was he he just took a step back, and it was like, wow, it was a revelation. But I
Yes,
think it was more to your point. It was like it was permission,
yes.
and how much time do we allow ourselves, or space we allow ourselves to give ourselves permission to define who we are, and
Yes.
to and to be unapologetic about it as well.
Yes. Yes, yes. And I think that is so important. And it kind of speaks to something that you and I were speaking about before we hit the record button. And that really is a through line of this podcast. And it is one, we all have boulders, though that is part of the dance of helping us discover that full potential of who we have the power to evolve into, so that we are taking that last breath feeling like our lives had meaning, that they were epic. And so therefore, since we all have boulders and rocks and pebbles, all have these things, if we knew that a boulder, a significant boulder that was going to be life transforming, was going to drop into our lives within the next year or two, would we be doing anything differently right here, right now? It's a big, important choice question. Would we be, quote unquote, struggling with the same things that we repeat over and over again? I struggle with. This is an ongoing topic that I have with lots of my own clients now, just simply with listen to your own language. Whatever you say in the present tense is programming that precious it of yours, the inner technology. And when you define yourself as someone who is eternally struggling, how can you expect yourself to get to a point where you're no longer in that struggle?
Talking about that boulder, I think we, on a global scale, experience somewhat of that experience with COVID.
Yes.
And how it was something that was happening in another part of the world,
Yes.
and all of a sudden it literally took over the world as
Yes.
a topic, as a environmentally, socially, cities, countries,
Yes.
and not something that, well, many of us never really encountered, a global pandemic,
Right.
not since the late 1800s, and you've and so I think we've had to look at that experience. And I remember going online and people were saying, wow, here's a chance for me to take time
Yes.
to rediscover my passion, rediscover
Right.
what's important to me, recognizing, hey, family time,
Yes.
personal fitness, downtime, spiritual development. It became almost a release for some to say, now I have room to do the things I've been putting off for a
Right.
while.
Right.
And and for some, it was that transformational time. It was almost like it was a forced personal retreat that we all that
Right.
was placed upon us, that whether we how we used that time
Right.
was was truly our choice.
Right.
And uh, and and from there, it for some, it became an inflection point.
Yes.
And so when I look back on that from my experience, I think that's where I found myself at a point where in my career and in life was, what what's next for me? What
Yes.
is it I really want to do, and where I want to focus my attention, and my vision and mission for what I want to leave as a legacy in this world.
Mm. And so I have always seen in you someone who is very heart centered, very focused on making your mission the mission of kind of amplifying other people's potential and helping them discover their own mission in life. How did you get there? Was there like an epiphany moment? Was there a boulder in your own life? Was there a moment of, yes, I want this, or, oh, now I know I definitely do not want that? Share with us what that, maybe that boulder, that rock, that pebble was that helped you realize, hey, this is who I intend to be, certainly in this next chapter of my life.
You know, it's it's an interesting question to even consider, because I think, well, was there any one moment, one thunderbolt moment that I can, pull from and say this is where it all changed?
Yes.
And yeah, nothing really substantive I can say that was the case. What I would say though, it was, I think, when I was sitting here, locked down, like with the 40 million, 100 million of my closest friends were doing the same thing. It was getting to a point where just thinking about what have I done, and
Yes.
what have I accomplished, and
Yes.
and I started to recognize in my own life some of the mentors and coaches I've had over my life, and how influential they were in allowing me to learn and grow, and some of them as well, that
Yes.
to recognize that I how what am I not using and amplifying
Mm,
here, and I recognized for myself that as much as I was working with other people and helping them in their missions, I really wasn't spending a lot of time on my own
mm.
mission, and articulating and finding that voice for myself. And
So, so let me just hop in for one moment because I want to make sure that we emphasize something that I think that you just expressed that is so important, that there are so many people out there who don't have this dramatic boulder that was attached to the side of a mountain for millions of years break off and cataclysmically fall into their life, wiping out and changing everything. That and nor do they have that moment where I knew when I was 8 years old, this is exactly what I was going to do. And guess what? The clouds opened and the angels sang, and the great Lord Almighty presented me with a scroll that said, "This is your legacy," right? For most people, or certainly for many people, I think the boulders are discrete. Some of them are very tangible, like the one we literally experienced in our family. And yet, interestingly enough, I often kind of look back and ponder how some of the most important boulders I didn't identify necessarily as boulders, even at the time in my life. They were course corrections, they were adjustments, they were focusing on things and making a specific decision what I was going to make that mean, or looking back on that moment and realizing that I had given it a meaning that no longer served me, and that I had the power and the ability to choose to adjust that. So, what I'm hearing you do is give whoever is listening here, whoever of you are out there who say, I don't really think I've had this huge boulder in my life, permission to kind of choose the moment when you are going to be your own boulder. Because one of the purposes of this podcast is so that you don't have to be crushed by a literal boulder in order to make these powerful choices. It goes back to that word boulder itself, where when you take the you out, in other words, when you make that choice, that decision to get out of your own way, then and only then are you empowering yourself to show up as that bigger, bolder version of yourself. And so, kudos to you to have chosen in some way to take all of the rocks and pebbles in your life and chosen your own kind of spiritual, this is my moment, my opportunity to get out of my own way and leave to go forward that bigger, bolder version of myself. And I think that's so, so critical and important.
and you can learn from others' experiences too. I think that's where uh, I've found myself lean towards. And you're working with people who've gone through different changes and transitions, and both planned and unplanned. It's hard not to be impacted by that.
Yes.
As a whether as coaching individuals or mentoring or even in training, and I also look at events in the world too. I remember during that time and looking at the George Floyd situation.
Mm,
And that really, I think, if anything, I would say was a real catalyst
mhm,
for taking action. What for me, it was recognizing at this point in my life how the mentors and people I grew up with, the elders of my
mhm.
community, were slowly leaving us, leaving this world, and waking up one day and recognizing that, oh well, now I'm seen as
Yes.
an elder in the community. So what does that mean? What's
Right.
my responsibility? What's my response? What's my
Right.
contribution to young entrepreneurs or students or professionals within the Black community, or locally, or within the Jamaican community here, and recognizing that I haven't really been all that active. And
Mhm.
so what is it that how do I now mobilize myself or define what that is in order to really to make the difference that others made for me, and then open
Yes.
up new avenues and paths my parents did, and their contemporaries over my lifetime.
Yeah. That is so impactful because I find myself as I listen to you feeling like you are the embodiment of how you have the potential to ignite radical change without showing up as a stereotype radical that sometimes inadvertently can create a pushback to change, right? And that it really is growth, is expansion, and it is teaching people to a certain extent to ask better questions, new questions. And ultimately, as you and I both teach people in leadership, these better questions come when you realize as a leader that you yourself do not have all the experiences, all the answers, or even all the expertise in the room, and that the best answers are going to come when you resist the temptation to invite only an echo chamber into your C suite. You want, you are going to go further faster when you introduce the possibilities of other people who've had other experiences and respect that a lot of times their opinions, their perspectives come from the limitations or the exposure to different circumstances. Some of them could be fears that they may have developed as a result, biases. Some of them may be strengths, actually, that can add to whatever it is the desired outcome. But the bigger, more epic outcomes come from expansion, not deliberate digging your feet or sometimes even your head in the sand and saying, nope, this is the box. The box will never change.
Oh, and that is kind of speaks to what innovation and creativity is all about, right?
Yes.
You can't expand if you're not willing to shift, and
Right.
you can't expand if you're not willing to bring in new ideas or change the way that you approach situations, or take in other people's experiences and or examples that may bring you closer to where you want to go. One of the elements that recently, and just in some of the conversations I've had with young professionals, and working in organizations, large organizations, and talking to some of their managers as well, or business owners, is the idea that I can't say anything. It's like I ask a question and I'm looking for input, and it's like I get nothing. And I'm afraid to say anything because it seemed like it's criticism. And it's like, and you can see the frustration, the way they express, I just want them to be successful, and yeah, I don't know how. And it's like, and I appreciate what they're saying, because when I speak to them, it's like I talk to these people. It's like, what is it? Like, how can we help you? And it's like, everything's fine. It's like, there's a fear that we talk about vulnerability, right? And we talk about the virtues of vulnerability and being, putting yourself out there, but it's so hard.
Yes.
Because again, going back to, well, if I'm vulnerable, then someone takes a snapshot or records that, then 2.2 billion people on Facebook could find that out. And I'm exposed. And yet, if you're not open to asking questions, or just making mistakes, then how much learning is really going to take place?
I think that's so important. And I think an extension of what you are expressing, Jeffrey, is, I think, one of the ways that we also have to be willing to change and expand is the way we have been defining ourselves. Because going back to the point of, I am defining myself as someone who constantly struggles with fill in the blank, my confidence, my being vulnerable, whatever it is. This is how I see myself. And what's fascinating is, I don't know what you found as like a coach or a trainer or in conversations with other people, but what I really find on a regular basis is that if I probe a little bit more deeply, what it really comes to is, I wouldn't know myself if I were to dramatically shift who I define myself as being. And it can even be some things that they know are self-sabotaging. Well, if I didn't do that, I don't know who I would be, or I might be forced to ask myself some questions that I'm not sure I'm really ready to hear the answers to those questions, to take ownership. And I think what you're talking about speaks so much to sometimes getting distracted by feeling like we should first fix the things of the past that need to be fixed. And it doesn't leave us any time, attention, or energy to say, wait a minute, why don't we focus on learning from the past and creating this empowered future based on the lessons of not just the mentors, but the anti-mentors, because there have been plenty of those, but don't mistake them for not being valuable. Sometimes our anti-mentors feed us more clarity than even the mentors do, because we very clearly say, that, no. I don't want to be like that. I don't want my world to be like that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, Meredith. And I think we have to be careful that what we use as markers in terms of defining what it is and who we are and who we're not. If we're constantly looking at the markers and saying, I'm not this, that's great, but you're not really defining, well, then who are you then? It's always,
well, and to your point, you bring up something so important. And this goes back to, again, what might I be assuming that is not necessarily true? Define success, right? Define loved, define respected, define someone who, right? I mean, so I think to your point, the markers, even the markers themselves, need to be assessed on a regular basis. Are they flowing? Are they in flow? Because again, as human beings, our species has survived not because we've been able to resist change, but because we've been able to adapt to change. And that demands that, in my humble opinion, that we ourselves are willing to take that harmony, that dance. Sometimes in some topics, we're going to be better than others, and assess, okay, relative to this new experience or new data or new encounter, do I still define myself the way I did even a moment ago? Because I can have all this data about past moments, but I have never lived this specific moment before. And this moment is my moment of opportunity.
And I think the question from that brings I out when it comes to coaching is getting deeper on the definition of, well, what does success mean to you? What
Yes.
does respected mean to you? What does
Yes.
smart or intelligent mean to you? And getting that individual to define what the meaning of what that word is, and to break it down in a way that they they understand its its relationship to how what is that they want and how they feel or how they view the world. Because
Yes.
it's very easy, to say, yeah, I want to be smarter, I want to be better, I want to be richer, all this la 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 la. Well,
Right.
but then, okay, great. So if I put 10 people in a room and I
Yeah.
ask them the same question, you're likely to get 10 different answers.
Right.
And so what going back, it goes back to how much time do you actually spend really defining the world in a way that allows for you to for you to understand and interpret so that people can be clear on how they can understand you,
Ooh.
and in a way, and that it's finding your voice. And we talked about, yeah, and you mentioned earlier, it's that potential, how much untapped potential is sitting there, and just waiting to be used. But if we're caught, it's and I, speaking from personal experience, that there's feeling that I can do so much more, and from a young age, and there are many people out there who told me I couldn't, either based on my age, based on my education, based on my skin color, based on where I was from, based on, it gave or always reasons for it. And I swallowed all of those reasons as well. And so instead of thinking, hey, what was possible, it became, well, these are the barriers that are in front of me, that
Yes.
defined by other people. And
Yes.
still, there are barriers, systemic barriers of people that many groups of people and individuals do encounter each and every day, and they're real and they still exist. And there also are many barriers that we place upon ourselves because of what we accept as truth that goes unchallenged and unexplored or even discussed, because we
Yes.
feel that, well, if it's on the internet, it must be true. And so when we take all this stuff in without really discerning, okay, what is discerning, what is it that we really want and what it means to us, then yeah, we're constantly going to be subject to that feeling of always feeling left behind, when we might even be surprised when we might actually be further ahead than we actually imagined or could be.
And things that are epic often arrive initially disguised as impossible, don't they? So it again, it's the metaphor, the old cliche that impossible and I'm possible is just a simple shift, right? And it really is how you're looking at it and what you see. And so, well, clearly, as you're watching this, as you're listening to this, you can see why Jeffrey and I actually played with the idea of creating a podcast during COVID. And so we recorded some actual episodes, which if you stay tuned here, you may see a few wonderful little bonus snippets. I'll just dangle that out there. Plus, I mean, you can see Jeffrey and I, when we have conversations, it's rarely about the weather. And so these are the kind of things, this how to choose to live, that I think is really important that we have with each other. And that when we're having them with each other, we're also having them with ourselves, right? This is an opportunity to really check in and be flowing and be understanding, who is it that I intend to show up being, and how do I intend to touch the lives of those around me? So definitely you can expect Jeffrey and I will on a regular basis be having these conversations, because I think these are things that do deserve airtime, things that will make us better, more quote unquote successful, happier, more epic people when we're having these kind of conversations. So this particular episode, Jeffrey, drum roll. Now I want to ask you a couple of questions that I always ask my treasured epic guests that are on my podcast. I know, breathe deeply. There we go. Center and align. So the first question is, I want you to imagine that it's generations ahead in time, and that for whatever reason, a lot of the best, most incredible wisdom on how to choose to live has just suddenly disappeared and become inaccessible to these future generations. If you were to share 3 gems for them to begin their journey in how to choose to live, what would those 3 gems be for you?
Hmm. 3 questions that come to mind is are the following: is what do you want to accomplish today? And by accomplishing what you set out to do, and then what meaning or impact will today's accomplishments have for you? And if you did this on a consistent basis, what would life be? What would your life look like over time?
See, I love hearing this. This so brings back what was such a catalyst for me when I was first starting my journey. And it's interesting, Jeffrey, because those questions can seem so simple. And yet, to your earlier point, we clog things up a lot if we're not careful, with so much complexity that it makes the simple things feel hard. And that's why we walk around sometimes saying, oh my gosh, yeah, I'd love to do that, but it's so hard. Feels like it would be so hard. I can't even imagine being able to do that. So as you're listening to this or watching this, I would pause this and go back and write down those 3 questions, because I think those are incredible, Jeffrey. So speaking of questions, here comes my next question for you. So my next question, I know, do you have enough brain space there? So my next question is, that, as you've heard me say, I believe we have one goal and one goal only. And that is to be taking our last breath, whenever that is, being able to authentically say, oh my gosh, this was freaking epic. I hope I have the chance to do this again sometime. And so, from where you are right now, what are some of the things in your life that would allow you to be able to say, this has been epic?
Being able to stand on a stage in front
Mm.
of a group of people and just share it. And if one person walks out of there, uh, influenced, impacted by what I had to say, then felt like I've made a difference in someone's life. Uh, Another one is being a mentor and enjoying that. Continue to do that, recognizing the value of the experience, and and imparting that wisdom and uh, well, you know, over so just more a wider lens through which future generations can see what's possible, not only on the outside but also on the inside as well.
Mm. Beautiful. So, final question. If you knew somehow that big boulder was going to drop in your life at some point within the next couple of years, how would you choose to live going forward? Anything that you would do differently, or that you would do more of, or that you might do less of if you knew?
I could start with the less worrying about what people think or had to say, and be clear on just doing what I've always felt I've been called to do, to impart, to teach, to guide, to lead, coach in the capacity I have in different groups and different organizations. Uh, I think one thing I'm starting to embrace now more so than I have at any point in my life is recognizing how influential and I I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I've it's a weird feeling
Mm-hmm.
to acknowledge that, and at the same time it's empowering and to embrace it, because uh, it does serve a need to others, and we need more leaders out there. We need more people to stand out there as examples and role models for others to gain confidence and to feel that what they want to achieve is possible. And just by showing up is a first step that can that's that's beneficial and serves a purpose for other people.
Ooh, and that to me is a beautiful closing of the loop of actually the quote that I feel is the embodiment of this entire podcast. And it's a Howard Thurman quote that is, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do that, because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. And the extended version of that, which is in my little head, is, and when you are alive, then you are able to go out there and truly live and touch other lives, which is exactly what you're speaking to. So, Jeffrey, as I mentioned, as you're listening to this, expect to see Jeffrey back on a regular basis. We are going to be having more of these really deep topical conversations. But in the meantime, Jeffrey, how can people stay connected with you?
Well, thank you, Meredith, for the invitation and also the return opportunity to meet with you again. You know, best thing, well, the group, my company, you know, working with the Make Well Performance Group, you know, we it's really had different events or different topics and exchanges of ideas and information. Go check me out on LinkedIn under Jeffrey Edwards, and you know, just check out some of writings or some blogs or perspectives, and you know, just really working with, you know, professionals like you out there, and really making this, trying to make help other people just be their best selves.
And just to emphasize, because you are such a humble human being, as a coach and particular as someone who can even be a business strategist for helping to grow businesses, I love that heartfelt angle that you bring to the table as well. So specifically, including for marginalized communities, your insights, your mentoring, your coaching, your training is invaluable. So if that applies to you as the listener, whether you're part of a marginalized community or not, if you are someone who knows that you too have a story that needs to be heard, you have a message that is too big to take to the grave, that it just is an impact, that you want to impact even one person, you know, Jeffrey has been a wonderful catalyst for my own life, my own career. I would encourage you, I will share on the show notes how to contact him. And Jeffrey, just thank you so much for coming on the How to Choose to Live podcast with me and sharing all of these deep thoughts, deep wisdom with me today.
Well, thank you, Meredith. You are. I said at the outset, you are inspiration to me, and I've
Oh.
always continued to enjoy your wisdom and the message you're putting out in the world. So, continued success and expansion. I look forward to coming back next time, but definitely following you along the way as well.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And of course, to you who is here and listening, and I would encourage you. I suspect that there's at least one person that you know that just might benefit from all the things that Jeffrey and I were talking about. So please go ahead and do share this episode. Of course, we want to see your comments. We would be humbled to see your likes as well. And of course, if you're so inclined, please subscribe. Go check out the How to Choose to Live podcast website, which is actually howtolivepodcast.com. And some of you ask where you can get these really cool eyeglass leashes. Jeffrey, you have to set you up with a pair of these. But you will find them on the howtolivepodcast.com website, and all kinds of fun surprises. So come back and join us on a regular basis. We love having you here. Jeffrey, I've loved having you here. And until next time, Tramily, go out and do something booyah epic. See you next time.
Wow, wasn't that an epic episode? So, definitely what I want to highlight in your bonus tips, your mission for today, is to look at those 3 questions. The first one, what do you want to accomplish today? What do you want to accomplish today? And including accomplishment, what does that mean to you? How do you want to be feeling? Not just what do you want to check off your to-do list, but what do you want to be able to look back on your day feeling? What do you want to have accomplished? So, question number 2, what meaning or impact will it have on you, on your life, on others people's lives if you do, or should I say, when you accomplish that today? Take a moment to really think about that, to really map that out and maybe reverse engineer. What does that mean you start doing? What does that mean you stop doing? What does that mean you perhaps do a little differently today? And then the third question, that's such a big one. It's if you were to do this consistently on a daily basis, day after day after day, what would your life look like over time? So today, take a moment to pause and just ponder, or even better, write down, mull out a little bit those 3 questions. And I, Meredith Alexander of the How to Choose to Live podcast, will see you on our next episode. So, booyah!